how's it, guys? Happy Aloha Friday. I hope you guys are having a great week. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos that we're bringing to you guys. Are they enjoying them?
I hope so.
I hope you're enjoying these videos. Anyway, we're going to be talking about a topical from the scripture that we're actually going to be looking over tonight. It's from Acts chapter 8. And today we're going to look at hard decisions.
Hard decisions.
Hard decisions, right. My wife has some stuff to ask me. You have stuff to ask me? No?
Stuff to ask you.
So we're gonna
we're just gonna be talking. We're just gonna be talking about hard decisions. What do you think a hard decision is?
What do I think a hard decision is? I think a hard decision is anything that you struggle with internally to choose. An example of a hard decision may be confronting your friend because of something they've done. A hard decision might be choosing which school to go to, right?
A job, maybe opportunity that you may or may not know if the Lord wants you to go.
Sure, yeah. Anything that for everybody it's different. You might be internalizing it and struggling with it inside. You might be frantic and you might be struggling with it on the outside as well. But a hard decision is anything that I think you struggle with on choosing. There's a battle. And I think it goes down to this battle between your flesh and your spirit. I think that is definitely something that prompts a hard decision, is your morality and your flesh battling each other to make a decision.
Really wanting to be in the will of the Lord and not really knowing whether that is the will of the Lord or not.
Yeah, sure. I think so.
What do you think a hard decision was for you to make in your own life, personally?
My own life, personally. You go first.
I think for me, a hard decision that I had to make was, one, going to college or not going to college, which college I was going to, what major to go in. And at the time, I think you think it's like a life or death situation. Your whole life is going to be altered by it. But as I found out, that wasn't the case. I'm still alive and I've gone through it. But I think another hard decision was choosing to go back into ministry, choosing to go back to a church. A specific church I had a lot of hardships at, and I had a lot of spiritual battles at. And I had gone to another church, and then the Lord had called me back, and everybody kind of was coming against me and questioning my decision to return back in ministry. And it was really, really hard. It was a really hard time. What about you?
I have a lot of hard decisions that I think I've made. I think specifically maybe in the time that I've been a Christian, one of the hardest decisions I've probably had to make was, I don't know, there's a lot of hard decisions that I've had to make. Being a minister and doing the things that I love to do, I love to minister to people. But I think one of the hardest decisions I had to make was leaving a ministry that I thought the Lord had put me in, and it was flourishing, it was doing really well. But I think just like Acts chapter 8, the Lord was calling me to go somewhere else. The Lord was saying, you have to go here and you have to do the work that I've called you to. And I said, Lord, why? The work is so good here. It's flourishing. The work is looking really well. And the Lord's like, yeah, but I have other work for you. And so that was a really hard decision for me to make, especially because I was working with youth kids. You know, you really have a bond and a connection to them. But when the Lord called me out, He called me out. And I had to submit myself to making that decision. And I really had to cast aside my flesh, because my flesh wanted to stay where I was comfortable. And my flesh wanted to stay where things were good. And you know what? It's the best decision that I've ever made, because the Lord has brought me to the place that I am today, and I wouldn't trade that decision for anything. But it was a really, really hard decision to make for me.
I think you touched on something really, really key, is that hard decisions make you incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times it's taking you out of what you think you want for yourself or where you want to be, and it makes you uncomfortable, and you have to step outside of yourself a lot when you make a hard decision. Really stepping by faith.
Yeah, you are stepping by faith. It's sort of like Peter stepping out of the boat in the water. You know, he sees Jesus out there, but it still takes faith to step on that water. It still takes faith to head into the storm. It still takes faith to leave the comfort of where you're at and enter into what God has, knowing that God has something better, because we know by the story, when he stepped out there, he ultimately lost faith, but Jesus picked him up, and Jesus walked back to that boat with him. And the calamity and the storm had stopped, but it took faith to make that decision, to look at Jesus, to keep his eyes fixed on Christ, and to walk out to him, and to hear the call, to hear the answer. Remember, he said, Peter, come out onto the water. To hear the Lord's call in that is really key in making a hard decision. Yeah. So what do you think is the hardest decision that we've made as a couple?
Oh, not the first thing that comes to my mind is coming to live at the ranch.
Coming to live in Waimanal, right? I think it's not like, I love living here at the ranch. I love being here at the ranch church. It's amazing. It is a blessing. It is nothing but great for us as a couple. But it's hard to leave what you're comfortable with. Again, me and my wife were just married. We had our own place. We had our own comfort. We had our own routine. We were close to home, close to our family. We were on the other side of the island where I've grown up and where I've come to know. I know all the places. I know the stores I like to go to, the restaurants I like to hang out at, the beaches I like to go to. And you essentially trade all of that in because you're 50 miles across the island. So, I mean...
It's so funny because it doesn't sound that bad considering we still live on the same island.
Yeah, definitely.
But here, it's all far distant.
But it's a different culture, and it's a different atmosphere as well. And it's not a bad thing, but the Lord has really grown us through making hard decisions like that.
Yeah.
And I think along with that decision came the decision for me to step into full-time ministry and working as a minister.
Yeah.
Leaving a career that I had built, a job that I liked, a position that I had earned and really worked for, and sort of leaving that behind, everything that I've worked for, and saying, Lord, okay, I'm gonna go where you want me to go, and I'm gonna do it because you're calling me to do it, not because it's it's ideal, but because you're calling me to do it. And you know what? Again, a hard decision that I made, but something that I would not trade for the world, because it was the best decision that I ever made, was to step into full-time ministry. And despite the hardship and despite the adjusting and feeling uncomfortable, the Lord was really leading it. And that's the most important thing when you're making a hard decision, is the Lord leading it, right? So I think the key with all of this, with making a hard decision, is how do you deal with it? You deal with it by relying on the Lord. That is it. That's. I know that sounds cliche and it sounds simple, but one of the scriptures that I like out of the New Testament is from the book of James. And James says here in James 1:5, he says, "But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him." And I think when we make hard decisions, we often seek wisdom. We ask our parents, we ask our friends, we ask the people close to us, like, hey, what do you think about this? And oftentimes we ask the Lord last. It's like our last resort is to ask the Lord what he wants to do. But here in James, he says, hey, if you're lacking wisdom, if you need knowledge on a decision to make, you need to ask the Lord. You need to do those things, because who better to get wisdom from the one who knows all things? That's the best place to go for wisdom. Another scripture that I really like is out of the book of Jeremiah, and it says in Jeremiah 33:3, it says, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and I will tell you great and mighty things which you do not know." And I think when we approach the Lord in our decisions, we find that it's a lot easier to make these decisions because the Lord is leading them and the Lord is speaking to us. And it's like my wife's life verse, like, "For I know the plans for you, plans to prosper you, plans to do good for you," and all of those things. And God knows the decision that you need to make. He has it laid out already. And the cool thing is when we go to him and we say, "Lord, make this decision for me," he's going to lead us in the way that he wants to lead us. And that's for the good. It's always for the good when we're relying on the Lord. So I encourage you guys to come out. We love you. I hope to see you tonight, guys. Aloha.
Bye.